So for this week's build, I think that I have created my favorite low-cost, high-profit build yet. So check this out. In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you how to build this rustic bird feeder birdhouse combo. So this thing turned out awesome, and everyone who's seen it absolutely loves it. And like I've told you before, if you're trying to make money in woodworking, you need to focus on projects with a huge market base. And last year alone, there was over $5 billion spent on wild bird accessories. So, what do you say we get a little piece of that pie? And I have a funny feeling that this build is going to get you your slice. So the first thing that we're going to do for this build is pick out the material that you'd like to use. Now you know me and you know that I'm going to try this build with fence pickets. But just because I like using pickets to build doesn't mean that you have to use those. You can really use anything that's a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch thick. But again, for this build, keep in mind that I'm using a 1/2 inch fence pickets. So now that you have your material picked out, let's make some sawdust. And as always, I'll be teaching you step by step on how to build this project. But if you're a plans in the hand type of person, I've got you covered. I built my entire plan library around something that I call Lego plans. That means exploded views, x-ray views, and clear diagrams for every single step. With over 11,000 5-star reviews, these plans have helped thousands of people of every skill level build successfully. If you're interested in the easiest plans on the internet to build from, head over to my website. I'll make sure to throw a link in the description. Typically, fence pickets are supposed to be 5.5 inches wide, but more times than not, that isn't the case. So I always like to rip my material down to the same width. This gives me nice uniform wood, and it also cleans up the edges. So for my material, I'm just going to start off by ripping everything down to 5 inches. So the first material that we'll be cutting will be for our base. That's what this entire birdhouse will sit on. And for that, we'll be needing 3 boards that are 5 inches wide by 17 inches long. And then for the center section of this barn, I'm going to call it the loft. And for our loft front and back boards, we'll be needing 4 boards that are 4 inches wide by 10 inches long. And then for the sides of this loft, we'll be needing 4 boards that are 4.5 inches wide by 12 inches long. And then the 2 little sheds on the side of this loft, and for the front and back of those, we'll be needing 4 boards that are 3 inches wide by 9 inches long. And then 4 side boards that are 3.5 inches wide by 7.5 inches long. Alright, so now that we have all of our wall boards cut, let's go ahead and add our roof pitches to our front and back boards. So for this, we'll need a 45-degree angle on the end of each one of our loft front and back boards. Then for our shed front and back board, let's put a 27-degree angle on each one of those ends. Alright, so this is what your part should look like right now. The next step is going to be to join this material together. So every one of our stacks except for this bottom board will actually be joined together to make 2 pieces. So to do this, I'm going to use some wood glue and some pocket hole screws. Then the only difference for this bottom board is that we're going to have 3 pieces. Let's go and get the screw placement laid out. The only parts that we will not be adding pocket holes to will be our shed front and backs. We're going to attach those a little different. So before I cut my pocket holes, I'm just going to lay out the screw placement for each one of these boards. For our base, we'll be cutting pocket holes in 2 of the 3 boards. And we'll measure these out to 1.5 inches, 8.5, and 15.5. And for our loft front and back boards, let's measure down to 2 inches and 8 inches. This will leave us with plenty of room to cut a hole later. Then for our loft sides, let's put one at 1.5 inches, 6 inches, and 10.5. Now keep in mind for all of these wallboard pieces, you'll only need to put pocket holes in 2 of the 4 boards. Then our shed sides, 1.5 inches and 6 inches. Now that we have these marked, let's head over to the pocket hole jig. Now with your drill bit set to the thickness of your material, let's go ahead and put a pocket hole on all of our marks. Okay, so now that we have our pocket holes in all of the parts that we have marked, let's go ahead and put these together. I'm getting ready. So for this, I'm going to use some wood glue and 1.25 inch pocket hole screws. Anytime that you're joining material like this, it makes it a lot easier if you clamp your material to your table. And for the bottom board, we'll join all 3 pieces. Okay, so now that we have all of our parts joined up, let's go ahead and add this multiple board design on the front of each one of our wall boards. So basically everything that you see here except for the bottom board is considered a wall board. So the look that I'm going for is multiple slat boards going all the way down, just like what you would see in an old barn. And to do that, we're going to use the table saw. But before you make those cuts, let's go and mark the side of our front and back shed boards that we want that design on. That's going to keep us from trying to put this together later, and we'll have a design on one board and the opposite side of the mating board. Yeah, I've done it plenty. So that's all that I'm going to do is lay these out just like that they're going to go into our barn. Then I'll mark the outsides of each one of these. That way our design will be exactly where we need it. All right, set over to the table saw. To make each one of our boards look like that there's several small boards put together, let's set our blade height to 1/8 of an inch. Then we'll start off by setting our table saw fence to 1/2 of an inch. Once we have everything set, with our boards face down, we'll make one pass. With this setting, we're just leaving a little groove in the face of the board. And then for the next pass, let's move our fence over to 1 inch, and then run all of our material back through, then 1.5 inches and 2 inches. Well, you get the point. We're using 1/2 inch increments all the way to the edge of the material. And this simple little saw mark is what makes this birdhouse so awesome. All right, so check these out. These things look awesome. But we are going to change one of our steps, and that is where we cut these little decorative grooves. Instead of cutting these grooves after we put our pocket hole screws in, let's back that up and cut these before we put our pocket hole screws in. You want to know why? I had my depth set just a little too deep, and I hit my screws. Instead of beating up our saw blade, let's cut our grooves after you cut out your pocket holes and before you put your screws in. Live and learn. Okay, so now that I'm done making sparks in a workshop do not mix well. Let's go ahead and finish this material up so we can put it all together. So for our next step, since we don't want any more sparks in the shop, I'm going to measure down 3 3/4 of an inch. Let's go ahead and cut our hole into one of our front and back boards. And then I'm going to drill my hole from the back to keep from messing up our design. Now the size of the hole is completely up to you depending on what type of birdhouse you're making. Since I'm just making a decorative birdhouse, I'll be cutting an 1 5/8 hole. Okay, so the next step is going to be to paint and stain our parts. Again, you don't have to do that now, but just makes things a lot easier. Now this part's where you can really set this project apart, and that's completely up to you on how you paint this. As for me, I'm going to try to keep the old barn look. So I want my barn to look like that it's been painted several times. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to paint all of my walls black. This is just going to be the undercolor. Once that dries, I'm going to paint everything kind of a burnt red. And when this is completely dry, I'll lightly sand everything, bringing out some of the natural wood and the blacks. I think a design like this really makes it look like an old barn. Okay, so now that you have all of your wall parts kind of painted up and ready to go, and I think these look awesome, let's go ahead and start putting all of this together. And to start off doing that, I'm going to take my loft sidewalls and put 2 more pocket holes in the bottoms of each one of these. These 2 pocket holes will help to lock all of this down to our main base. All right, so this is all the parts that we have so far. Let's start putting this thing together. So to start this out, you'll be needing one of your loft sidewalls and then one of our shed sidewalls. So as far as putting all of this together, I'm going to be using some exterior wood glue. And personally, I'm going to be using crown staples. You can also use brad nails. I've built with brad nails for years and years. So I've recently started using crown staples and I really like them. But regardless of what fastener that you're going to be using, let's go and attach our front and backs to the shed sidewalls. Bottle booger. Bottle booger. And if you have issues with bottle boogers because you can't find your cap or always forget to put it back on, use this super expensive tool. A screw. Screw it in to your bottle booger and wiggle it out. We'll attach the short side of our front and back to the outside edge of our sidewalls. Okay, so now that we have our 2 sheds put together here, let's go and attach these to our loft sidewalls. So the first thing that we're going to do is to make sure that our pocket holes are facing down. Then we'll just add some wood glue to the edges and we'll make sure that we're centered up. Go ahead and add some crown staples or brad nails from the back. An easy way to find this if you have a sliding ruler is to just measure your overhang and then transfer that to the back using it as a guide. This thing's looking awesome. Then we'll just do that for the opposite side and we're ready to move on. Okay, so now that we have our two shed sides put together, let's go and attach these to our base. So I'm going to start by installing my left side. I'm just going to put some wood glue around the bottom, and I'm going to space this 1/2 of an inch from the left side edge and 1/2 of an inch from the back edge. I'm going to lock it down with pocket hole screws. I'm going to line mine up with the back of the base, but that's completely up to you. Then to add the right side, I'm going to use my front board to find the spacing. I'm just going to line it up so that it covers the edge of the left side, and this will show me exactly where I need to place the right side. And if you're thinking that it's looking kind of odd, don't worry, it does not go there. We're just using it as a guide. And now let's go ahead and install our front and back. And to do this, we're just going to align our top corner of our front with the top corner of our side boards. And now this is starting to look like a barn. So the next thing that we're going to do is to install a loft floor. You need to make a board that is 7 inches by 9 inches. If you're using fence pickets, you'll join 2 together. You'll simply slide it in between your front and back and then nail it into place. And now with all of that put together, let's start on the roof. For our shed roofs, we'll be needing 2 4-inch by 9-inch boards. And then for our loft roof, we'll be needing 2 boards that are 5-inch by 11-inch, one that is 1 3/4 by 11-inch, and another one that is 1 1/4 by 11-inch. And one last thing that I'm going to do to my 4x9 boards is to add an angle on the top where it meets the barn. Let's knock this out on the table saw. So to do this, we'll simply set our table saw blade to 27 degrees, and then we'll just trim off our outside edge. Okay, so now that I have all my roof parts cut, and this is at 27-degree angle here, this is the look that I was going for. See how it fits nice along the wall? But next we need to figure out how we're going to design these roof parts up. So there's several different ways that you can do this. Now I've done like a wooden shingle look in the past and it looks really good. One of the things that I don't see a lot of is wooden tops with a metal looking roof. I grew up playing in barns. Whenever I was a teenager, I actually had a business taking down barns. So I've seen a lot of these. Metal roofs on barns like this are super nostalgic. Now obviously if you have some access to some old metal, use that. But we're going to pretend that you don't. So let's try to recreate that look out of wood. So our 2 4x9 pieces are the actual size that we're needing. As far as our loft top, we'll be using one of our 5-inch boards and one of our narrow boards on each side. This narrow board that's longer will actually overlap our smaller one. So just keep in mind that these are paired up whenever we're making these next cuts. So the next thing that I'm going to do to try to get this metal look is to just measure over 1 1/4 inch increments all the way down. We need to make those marks on each one of our boards. Now with our boards marked out, let's head over to the miter saw and make these grooves. So to get this look, we're going to be using the miter saw's depth stop. Now you can also do this on the table saw using a miter jig, but I'm going to go ahead and do it this way for those that may not know how. So to set your depth stop, you'll simply lower this little tab, drop your blade, and then with your material against the blade, you want your teeth to overhang your material about 1/8 of an inch. Then you'll just put a thin piece of scrap wood against your fence, and we're ready to make these cuts. So with our depth stop set, we'll simply make these grooves lining up with each one of our marks. And then once we have that done, let's go and get these painted. So for our roof, I want it to kind of look like a rusted silver. Back in the day, the farmers loved this silver color. So as you can see, I'm starting out with a black base on all of this. It's mainly just to fill in all of our grooves. And I'm going to go over the top with a silver colored paint. Then to add a rusted look, I'm going to add a bit of copper paint. Now again, this part's completely up to you. Get creative with it. Alright, so I got my roof panels all fixed up. I think that they turned out pretty cool. There you go. Looks like an old rusted roof to me. So now with our roof boards cut and painted up, let's go and get these attached. And before you attach this, make sure that you're leaving 1/2 of an inch overhang on each end. So we're going to start out by attaching our 1 1/4 and 1 3/4 boards. I'm going to put the 1 1/4 board on my right side and overlap it with the 1 3/4. Now with the 2 narrow boards attached, let's go and add our 5-inch boards. Okay, so now that we have the loft roof on, let's go and add our shed roofs. Now for the shed roofs, the only thing that we have to make sure of is that our angle that we cut on the board is against our wall. And just like for our top, we'll make sure that we leave a 1/2 inch overhang on each side. All right, so as awesome as this thing looks right now, let's kick it up a notch. We're almost done. So I'm going to make a couple of barn doors for this thing. Each one of my doors are 2 1/4 inches by 6 inches tall. Then I just put some grooves in it like we did for the walls using the table saw. And then for the boards that I'm putting on top, this is 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch material. For the top and bottom of our Z, they're 2 1/4 inches long. And then our center board for the Z is 3 3/4 of an inch long with 26-degree angles on each end. And the last little thing that I'm adding to these doors is going to be a sliding rail. And the very last thing that I'm doing to my little barn is putting some trim up around the edges to hold in any birdseed. For this, I've ripped my trim down to 1.5 inches wide and put a 45-degree angle on each side. For this, you'll need 2 boards that are 16 inches long and 2 boards that are 18 inches long. Since mine is made for a bird feeder, I did not include a clean-out door for the birdhouse. But if you actually want to use this as a birdhouse, just install one of your loft roofing boards using screws instead of nails. That will allow you to remove a roof panel anytime that you want to clean it out. All right, so check this out. This thing turned out awesome. And we made an entire thing just using fence pickets. So you just watched me build this entire project. There's no part of this project that you couldn't handle. So, no excuses. Is this something that you'd like to build for yourself as a gift or to sell? Well, you know what you have to do, and that's get up, get out, and get your build on. Till next time, we'll see you. Imagine taking a pile of wood and turning it into something amazing. Now, imagine doing that without years of frustration. You do not need a fancy workshop, expensive tools, or years of experience. With Woodworking Kickstart, you'll build confidence and real skills in no time. So you can spend years making mistakes and learning the hard way like I did, or you can start building with confidence today. So join me in Woodworking Kickstart and let's get your journey started.